necessarily this time, but overall, very strong report, Carol.
Gotcha, Lindsay. Thanks very much. Well, hiring in the U.S., as we mentioned, rising more than expected in March, while the unemployment rate unexpectedly fell, matching October's 5-year low. We do want to get more on today's report. In Washington, John Irons, he's the senior economist with the Democratic-leaning policy group Center for American Progress, joining our discussion on this report. We're also still in studio, Lakshman Achuthan from the Economic Cycle Research Institute. Locke, thanks for sticking around. John, welcome. And I do want to start with you. What do you think of today's labor report?
Well, I think your reporting is roughly right. I think they are slightly better than we were expecting. But we still see that there is some weakness that remains in the market. We're still a little bit below the averages that we had last year and in the year before. Last year we had an average per month of about 189,000. The year before that, we had about 212,000 per month as an average. So we are a little bit better than the lower numbers that people were expecting, but we're still not there. On some of the intermediate numbers, when you go deeper into the report, when you look at residential construction, you're still seeing a slight decline, and we're still well below our peak from September last year. So we still see some industries where there are weaknesses. And as you said, we do see some areas of growth, particularly the service sector, the healthcare sector, and some other ones. These are primarily continuations of trends we've seen over the last several years. So not a whole lot unexpected here.
Look, we've had some time to talk about John saying we're still not quite there. Do you agree with that?
Well, yeah, and just to step back a few years, get a bigger picture here, we've had a structural shift. We're having slower jobs growth in this country. There are a whole host of reasons, reaching all the way to globalization, and also the fact that the labor force is just growing a little bit slower. It makes it tougher, actually, to hire the amount of people we used to hire at this type of jobs growth. Say that if GDP was around 2.5%, 3.5%, historically we'd see well over 200,000 jobs a month. And here we are cheering about something in the 100,000 a month range. So just to put that in perspective, now having said that, the real question coming into today's report was, are we seeing the economy stall or fall off a cliff? And there, I think we're getting a resounding no.
John, let me bring you.
Think that,
go ahead, John.
I think that's right. I mean, we aren't seeing the economy stall and fall off a cliff. You know, in the central banking world, you talk about the Goldilocks economy, where things are neither too hot nor too cold. I think we're somewhere there, but the porridge is rather bland at this point. So no one's getting really excited about these numbers. Our expectations have become so low, I think, that when we get excited about a $180,000 number, I think that's telling.
Right.
So I think we really need to raise our expectations a little bit here.
Absolutely. And you know, if this was the longer term forecast that we're going to see this for years ahead, I think you would certainly have to question what's going on. But the cycles actually turn, and here my expectation is that we'll actually see stronger economy as the year goes on, and moderately higher job growth.
All right, gentlemen, we have to sit tight for a moment. Do have to take a break, but we're going to come back, continue our discussion. It is 44 minutes after. We're talking with John Irons and Lakshman Achuthan on today's jobs report. We'll get more when we come back to you in just a moment.
Seven climate control sensors, dual door seals to reduce noise, even electrostatic filters to keep dust particles out. It's nice to know that no matter how bad it gets out here, it is continually nice in there. At Mercedes-Benz, we are always in a comfort zone.
See your local authorized Mercedes-Benz dealer for a special lease offer through Mercedes-Benz Financial.
That's a lot of grain. I don't know.
It's okay, guys. I've done a course. What? Positive thinking. Okay. Positive thought has a positive impact. That's right. Okay, come on.
Talk is no substitute for action. Make it happen. The Royal Bank of Scotland Group.
That's the power.
Dr. Big Shoes, please report to surgery. Dr. Big Shoes.
Sometimes a substitute just won't work. And when it comes to options, there's no substitute for CBOE.
Why does that bother you?
Why does it bother me? So easy a caveman can do it?
Well, it's just a commercial.
Okay. Well, what if it said, Geico.com so easy a therapist can do it?
Well, that commercial wouldn't make sense to me.
Why not?
Well, therapists
Are what? Smart? My mother's calling. I'll put it on speaker.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Around the globe, around the clock. You're watching the world's ultimate financial authority. Bloomberg Television. A wealth of information.
All right, we're back at 47 minutes after. We do want to continue talking with John Irons, senior economist with the Democratic-leaning policy group Center for American Progress, and still in studio with us, Lakshman Achuthan of the Economic Cycle Research Institute. John, does this change at all your thinking about what the Fed may do later on this year?
I don't think so. I think we still see the same weaknesses that we would have expected before this report, both in the housing market and with energy prices. So I'm not sure this really changes my particular outlook. Like I said, this was slightly above expectations, but I don't think it fundamentally changes the picture.
Black, what about you?
No, we've been saying the Fed would probably be on hold despite their words, and I suspect that'll continue to happen. And the thesis is pretty simple. There's no recession, so you don't see any rate cut.
And your leading indicators tell you there's no recession.
Absolutely, they reject it out of hand. I mean, and these indicators are hypersensitive to recessions. I mean, this is what they do. They forecast recessions, and they are accelerating. The weak spot is likely to be the industrial sector. And then in terms of potential rate hikes out there, which may be where the discussion goes in a quarter or two, we still have a mild downtrend in leading inflation indicators. So that adds up to the Fed on hold for as far as we can see. And we'll watch the incoming data.
John, anything else within this report that you think is worth noting? I mean, Lindsay was breaking down some of the industries in terms of job creation. She talked about financial services, essentially unchanged, healthcare strong, retail strong. Anything else you think we should be pointing out here?
Well, I think if you look at the household data, the unemployment rate dropping to 4.4%, which is actually probably unchanged from a statistical perspective from last month. I think it's important to note that when you look at how many people have jobs, as in the employment to population ratio, we're still below levels that we were pre-recession in 2001. It looks like this month we saw a little bit of good news on that. We did see employment rise by that measure as well. The number of people in the labor force seems to be increasing as well, which is a positive sign. But we have had a very weak performance on this measure. So I think when you look at the longer trend, there's still some worry spots there. But this report seems to be somewhat encouraging on that front.
Yeah, and I would echo what John's saying. I mean, right in the middle of those numbers that he was discussing is roughly 3 million jobs lost in the manufacturing sector in the wake of the 2001 recession. Those aren't coming back, and that's a real problem structurally that has to be worked through over time. The best antidote for that is a long expansion. So if we get a soft landing here, that's great. I mean, we had a soft landing in the mid-90s.
Think we're going to get that?
I think we are going to get that. It looks like the odds are increasing that you're going to get that. In the mid-90s, the Fed did help, or was part of a soft landing scenario that developed there. You had a 10-year expansion. You had 20 million something jobs. I mean, that's the best way to kind of solve that problem that I think he's alluding to there.
So, John, Ben Bernanke doing pretty well in his first year or so here?
Well, I think he's doing okay in his first year or so, but the real challenges, lie ahead, I think. When you really have to look at the weaknesses that still remain in the economy, and I think everyone is hoping that these numbers go from 180 to 250, and I remember in the late 1990s, you're talking about 300,000 as the benchmark of a good month. So we really have to come up from where we are now, otherwise we're just muddling along.
John, what's your big concern here? Because you said there's still more worries, there's worries out there. What is your biggest concern and the biggest risk to be job growth and the economic outlook?
Well, I think the biggest question that's still in my mind is the housing market. We have seen some declines, but the question is, what will the spillover be to the rest of the macroeconomy? And up until now, I don't think we've really seen much of the spillover, but that could still come around. And so that's what I'm going to be looking at in terms of future reports, what's happening with residential construction, and will that start to spill over to other sectors? Like I said, I don't think we've seen a whole lot of evidence that that's happened, but there's an enormous potential for that to actually take hold when you see foreclosures going up, when you see bankruptcies happening in the mortgage market.
Now, that kind of thing is very important. These are negative shocks and the potential contagion from them. And what is really important is, where are we in the cycle when those shocks are occurring? If we truly are in this vicious downturn where the leading indicators are falling down ahead of us and we're getting these negative shocks, then you've got a very risky scenario. Right now, it's the opposite. We have the indicators moving up, so the vulnerability to these things is quite low. On top of that, there's leading indicators, good leading indicators of the housing market that are on the rise.
Got to say goodbye.
Right.
But we appreciate all your time. Wish we had
Right.
more, but we covered a lot of ground. John Irons, senior economist with the Center for